my favorite يعني وأنا متحيزة فمش مشكلة هقول. And I know many people here are متحيزين too فاحنا تمام يعني فاهمين بعض. دكتور ياسمين صالح is a clinical psychologist and supervisor. مش هقدمها بالحاجات super formal. I think she can do that very well لما تبتدي تتكلم بس she's someone who is very important for our student body عامة undergraduate and graduate students in many ways. Anna personally, she has been significantly impactful in my journey as a professional and as a person. حقيقي مبسوطة قوي that I have her today on this conversation and thank you all for attending. خلينا نبتدي على طول. دكتور ياسمين, how are you? ازيك؟ خلينا نبتدي الأول إن احنا نقول احنا النهارده بنتكلم عن supervision ودي حاجة مش ناس كتير بتفهمها من بره الفيلد because they think it's technical guidance or it's something like that while it's deeply relational وفيها أبعاد كتيرة وفيها حاجات كتيرة قوي. فالنهارده this is our topic, we're focusing on supervision from an attachment lens. ودكتور ياسمين من الناس اللي بتعمل ده مش بس عشان بتعمله as part of the courses and stuff بس يعني she's pioneering the field of supervision in Egypt in many ways. فممكن تحكي لنا ليه you're passionate about this and what got you بالذات في حتة السوبرفيجن انك تركزي عليها قوي.
Hello. So actually, I'll go back a little bit. The first time when you asked me to do this, and we talked about the topic and we talked about supervision, it was very interesting to me. طبعا عرفت بقى down memory lane, and actually today is a big memory lane. I see a lot of memories here. And it started me thinking of my own supervision journey as being supervised, and then how I ended up in this. Very interesting. I've had 14 supervisors throughout my life. 14. And when I think about it, that between masters, doctoral, كل supervision while you're in training or post training, in my probably few more, but too many because maybe I just didn't leave a mark. From the 14, I was trying to think who really left an impact from me. From the 14, 4 did. 4, and thankfully 2 were in the very early phase, and 2 were at the very end. The rest are okay. And that's all we can say. So, and it got me thinking about how this informed my supervision style, because every supervisor was, كان في supervisor oh, did you finish your notes? كان في supervisor you're not doing مش عارفة إيه, وفي supervisor that's looking at me as a person instead of what I'm missing and giving me guidance and support and mentorship. And what people don't know about supervision is not a natural progression of being a clinician. There's a misunderstanding بيقول إن if you're a therapist يبقى خلاص يبقى somehow you know how to supervise because you have the clinical knowledge. That's a very specific supervisor. That's a supervisor that has modality information, intervention information. There's nothing wrong with them. But then there are people who learn to be supervisors. And that's, I learned to be a supervisor. When I was a supervisor in training, I had supervisors who were supervising my supervision. So it's a kind of an interesting model. And supervision has the theories زي كل حاجة تانية, and then you can create your own, which is what I did. When I think of all the supervisors I've had, I think, Nana, I always tell you this as an educator. I usually learn from the educators that I didn't like what I shouldn't do. Same thing with supervisors. Supervisors who were constantly pointing out what I'm missing were difficult because it just didn't feel like, okay, like, could I be doing something right with everything that I'm missing? I understand where they were coming from. They were coming from the point of trying to make me more aware of what I could do better, but it didn't help, I would say. It helped just a little bit, but not enough. So when I think about it, I think what I've always loved about all the supervisors that left an impact is that they were attuned to me. They knew what I needed when, and they gave it to me, whatever it was. And that got me thinking, this is the kind of supervisor I want to be. I want to be that kind of supervisor who sees what the person in front of me needs at that moment in development as a clinician and to be able to give it to them.
حلو. هرجع تاني للايموشنال اتيونمنت because that's very important. بس if we can briefly say انت بيكون ايه هدفك في السوبرفيجن process, because I know many people seek supervision فيه عشان هم لسه في graduate program, that's part of what they do. في ناس بتseek supervision بعد كده maybe for a specific modality or because they want to process client experiences, whatever the reasons are. انت الجول بالنسبه لك عامه من السوبرفيجن relationship بيكون ايه؟ And then we go deeper into the relationship itself.
أنا goal بتاعي is growth and development as just a very broad goal. And then I always say exactly what you're saying. The supervision is developmental. Whatever stage you're at, you're going to need something. And you have, I like supervisees to be able to articulate what they need, because if they're not aware what they need, this is going to be part of the work. You need to let me know what you need. Obviously, very early practitioners in training may have a harder time until they learn to sort of understand what they can ask for. And that's a very important thing that you learn in supervision. I don't think anyone tells you that you can actually ask for what you need. By the way, you can ask for what you need, but you have to know what you need. And if you don't, then it's the supervisor's responsibility to help you figure it out. Let's figure out what it is that you need. Because it's very easy for supervisors to say, here's what you need to do. And that's sort of not an attuned supervisor. It's a giving, they're just going to give you.
Yeah. طيب الحته بتاعت emotional attunement اللي كنت لسه بتقولي عليها, it reminds me a bit لما بنتكلم على emotional attunement and parenting. انه a parent needs to balance warmth and support مع شويه limits وشويه boundary setting. في balance كده في النص. اعتقد if you support maybe you hinder growth at some point, and if you challenge في بقى shame وفي حاجات كتير في supervisory relationship can happen. But how do you approach that emotional attunement as a supervisor? How do you balance that with your supervisees?
It's difficult. I think of supervision as very relational. It sounds odd to say that, but it's a relationship, and part of the relationship is understanding when you need to do what. And sometimes you might be doing this two things at the same time. It's not a mixed message, but you might be doing the same thing. I'm going to support and challenge. It's sort of and that's where the attunement comes in, because you have to also know who can tolerate what it is that you're doing, because not everybody can tolerate that. We talk a lot about it's unfortunate in as supervisees and as supervisors we don't get to choose each other, right? All students are assigned and all supervisors are assigned, and we don't get to choose. So we have to sort of make do with, and I don't say make do in a bad way, but we make do with what we are given. And in that moment, when we make do with what we're giving, we have to figure out that's why I'm saying it's relational. I have to understand the person اللي قدامي ده محتاج ايه دلوقتي. Are they aware of what they need? Are they utilizing what they have? Are they not utilizing what they have? And that's the relational aspect. I always say with supervision, you have to, and that will get us into the line of imta personal or imta there are boundaries. But you have to get to know the person in front of you.
But how do you manage, what does a secure relationship look like in supervision, and how do you do your part in trying to establish a space for that?
A secure attachment is it's like anything, where you feel safe enough to make mistakes, safe enough to come and say, I'm not sure what I'm doing, and that's another supervision. I have no idea what I'm doing, or I made a mistake. The thing that lights up my eyes, and I hear it all the time, مش all the time, but it happens often, and I أعترف بحاجة. I love that, because that's the line that says, oh, of course, please, confess your mistakes. And that's a safe, trusting place where it says, when you can do that and know that the person in front of you is not going to respond and say, why the hell did you do that? Or how could you? you know, which is the more punitive, who's going to take it and say, yeah, that wasn't the best thing that could have happened. You know, how can we fix this? Or what can we do? Or just say, maybe it wasn't such a horrible mistake. How can we make it into a growing thing? And to understand that if you have a supervisor where you can come and admit your mistakes, and you trust that the supervisor has your best intentions. And they're not doing this because it's going to make them feel better. And also I think as supervisees, all supervisees want to know, this is the challenge about in supervision, I care about the clients, but I can't make the clients in the forefront, but they're always in the forefront. How do I make the supervisee feel that they are at the forefront, but I actually care about the clients? يعني اللي هو ما هو في third variable هنا.
Stakeholders.
They cannot be harmed and they cannot be, ما ينفعش نسيبهم كده اللي هو حد بيجرب فيهم God knows what's happening. But at the same time, the supervisee cannot feel and I care more about the client than about them. It's a sort of, you know, like I care about the client, but I can't show that I care about the client. So I don't. Yeah.
Okay. طب if you are providing the space for that, but let's say مثلا حد with an avoidant attachment style ممكن شوية downplay their needs, مش worry a vulnerability أو ممكن
كل ما يكونوا avoidant كل ما أنا انبسط. My favorite to choose. At least أحسن من anxious شغال بس disorganized لا. Secure ما عندناش. The unfortunate hazard of this field. هذا بيخش في الفيلد ده يعني sorry to say مش secure. We're doing the wounds. هنظبط الوونز. إن شاء الله يوم من الأيام.
طيب avoidantly attached person على قد ما هو ممكن يبقى اسهل في التعامل في الحاجات بس ممكن برضو اتصور ان ده شخص ممكن ما يحبش يبان incompetent مثلا ممكن يبقى actually اصعب في حتت معينه انه you get them to see their role في حاجه او انه they actually have this kind of self awareness when انا هاجي I disclose this because I might انا قلقانه على شكلي اكتر او عايزه ابان بطريقه معينه
and I don't need help.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's why I keep saying, you know, I not just that I like it because, so a lot of therapy is about emotional attunement, right? And when you have someone with avoidant characteristics or patterns, they're tending to stay away from the emotional attunement. And that sort of, as supervision, it becomes very important because you need them to become emotionally attuned so that they can actually help their clients. If they're not emotionally attuned, then they're missing the bulk of what's happening in therapy. There's a huge parallel process that happens between supervision and therapy. Everything that happens in supervision reenacts itself in the therapy. So you need this to happen, and you need to show a challenge that is sort of safe, where the person can say, okay, I get it. And to, again, and I say it's a great place, this is the safety and the trust. I know that everything is working well in supervision when I feel that the supervisee can trust the process, can trust in, even if I'm not giving them interventions at this point in time, that there's a reason why I'm doing that. Even if I challenge you, there's a reason that I'm doing that. I'm not doing it to make you feel bad, because there's an evaluatory process, but I'm doing it so that you can grow. And once supervisees understand the growth perspective, and that this is the whole intention, things are smooth sailing, right?
Can you give an example? You just said حاجة that's very important, how the parallel process ما بين supervision and therapy. Can you give an example of how you can work through something with a supervisee and later on they're able to take this to the therapy setting بشكل واضح؟
ما هو supervision في حتة كبيرة منه is modeling. You know, you're modeling a relationship. right? You're modeling a relationship, hopefully that's healthy. And then when you model that, the supervisee has to figure out how they feel being in this relationship, and figure out, can I give my client something similar? So sometimes, often enough in supervision, supervisees will go and do something that you did or said in supervision with the client in their own context. Examples, مش عارفة بقى examples زي إيه. It's not a technique أصله. It's a way of being. It's how can I provide that same safe space? But they figure out, sometimes it's as simple as things like structure, that you have structure, that you show up when you're supposed to show up, that you're consistent, that when you say something you do what you're, يعني في حاجات كتيرة that establish safety that some people minimize, but they're the basics of safety, and I think it's the same in parenting. When you have the very basic, but once they start to see that, maybe this is what makes me feel safe, they can replicate that same exact thing with clients. And then في حتة relational where I think when you get a good relationship with your supervisor, you start to understand the value of relationship in therapy. A lot of times therapy would focus on your techniques, your interventions, your skills, what you do know, and what intervention هتستعمليها, evidence-based practices, all of this is great, but there's a huge relational component. No client will receive أي حاجة منك if they don't have a relationship. If they don't feel that you have their best interest in mind.
That's true. The relationship ما بين السوبرفايزر والسوبرفايزي is very interesting, and I guess it's very tricky in some ways عشان هي مش زي البروفيسور ستودنت، هو فيها level of closeness أكتر وفيها disclosure أكتر، وفي نفس الوقت هي مش therapist client، هي ممكن أقل من ده سنة in terms of closeness و disclosure، فهي حاجة في النص.
وفي مصر بقى هي حاجة كده.
هي حاجة كده، هي حاجة كده. وانا بحضر حاجات للتوك بتاعت النهارده قريت حاجه that was very interesting اول مره افكر فيها بالطريقه دي. ان supervision is therapy for the therapist's work, not therapy for the therapist.
Yes.
And I thought that was a very interesting way to put it.
It is.
How do you go about ده؟ لانه ده سؤال كبير قوي هنفصصه شويه، بس supervisees come in with their attachment histories. They come in with a lot of issues, insecurities, vulnerabilities, and this is the place to explore that and how it can have a role in therapy. فحتة الboundaries هنا بتيجي فين؟ Culturally speaking كمان. Disclosure.
Layers كتير قوي، استني بقى نبتدي بقى. Okay, so boundaries are often misunderstood as rigid rules, right? As rigid parameters. Boundaries are not rigid. Boundaries are for safety. You know, I create, I always think of it as the swimming pool metaphor. لو تعلمي حد swimming in a swimming pool, the swimming pool has boundaries. It's intended for their safety. This is where you get from point A to B. The likelihood of you having an unsafe experience is not like the sea. So I think of boundaries in that way. I'm not trying to contain you. I'm trying to provide a safe space within the parameters of what you're able to do. So, what you said about disclosures or boundaries وكل الكلام ده is very important because there will always be issues, personal issues that come up in supervision, whether the supervisee هو اللي بيجيبهم or the supervisor highlights them. But we always say the things that come up in supervision that are personal have to be client and therapy related. يعني I can't sit with someone and talk about the daddy mommy issues لو عشان بس احنا عايزين نتكلم فيهم. لا ما احنا مش هنتكلم فيهم. I'm sorry about daddy mommy issues بس يعني احنا مش هنتكلم فيهم بس عشان هنتكلم فيهم because the person is trying to understand their own issues and resolve their own issues in supervision like it's a therapy. No, we're only going to be addressing it if it's suddenly starting to show in therapy. So when a supervisee comes and says, you know, I was sitting with this client and I was totally triggered and I just can't sit with them anymore, or they're triggering me, they're not listening to me, they're resisting. Okay, so this is a moment where we have to say, okay, let's come in and figure out what is it about you that is, that's in your history that is making you feel that way. And it's not about tell me all the juicy stuff, but it's about let's figure out where that thing that
طب
is.
حلو قوي. انا هفولو اب على ده حاجه صغيره. دلوقتي حد قال انه this is something that is triggering them او حاجه ليها علاقه بالثيرابي process. You can see this. فبداوا يتكلموا. Still, where do you draw the line ما بين ان دي حاجه بقى that they need to take to therapy, that's not your place as a supervisor anymore to go into these details versus ما هو ده مهم برضه because it's coming up in their relationship with the client.
ما احنا we do teeny little bit. هو مش therapy. هو ايه؟ ما احنا كمان we have to also understand. مش عارفه ليه حق بعربي بس يعني تمام. اللي هو to tell a therapist in training to go to therapy في مصر، البلد اللي هي اصلا كل الناس كلهم يعرفوا بعض، وبعدين to tell a therapist in training اصلا انت مش مظبط قوي فروح لثيرابيست هو probably كان student معاك يوم يعني وبعدين فلوس وبعدين يعني ففي عندنا variables and layers. I'm not saying that I'm going to provide the therapy, but I'm going to provide what we call take the edge off, right? For something maybe I can give them a reflection to think about how this is coming up. And there are things that are not obvious to, especially early in training, obvious to supervisees about what's really going on. And I can say, this is something that you will need to think about where this is coming from for you. It's not tell me, it's you need to. A lot of what we teach in supervision is self-reflective practices, right? You have to become self-aware. You cannot be a good therapist if you're not self-aware. You have to know who you are. مش مهم with all your broken parts and all your you just have to know who you are so that you understand why you are that way.
ساعات الدايناميك ده حته منه ممكن تقلب اللي هو انه you're perceived as a therapist فيفضل يجي بحاجات زي كده، وبرده شايفه سيناريو تاني ممكن يبقى شويه you're the symbolic parent in that sense because وايديالايز يو بقى او العكس خالص. يعني انا ابروجكت عليكي حاجات او انت idealize you as a figure. ده كلها ممكن attachment insecurities تطلع in supervision.
انا بلعب دور ماما كويس قوي بس بسحب. So a good mother, and I'm not a mother, but I think my goal for supervisees is I'm going to let you go. Maybe some of them don't know that in the beginning, but I'm going to help you grow to the point where I can let you go. I think the letting go part is the hard part for a lot of supervisees because it's kind of like, it's not a rejection, but you have grown so much to the point that you don't need me anymore. You are very capable on your own. So, and there is a part where, and this is my own self-reflection as a supervisor, where I have to say, am I mothering right now? Like am I doing a corrective experience for previous, because there's a line where there's a corrective experience, but corrective experience cannot cross the line where I'm going to actually mother, or reenact the parenting. So I have to sort of back out and say, I'm not going to be mother. Like tell myself and maybe tell my supervisee in an indirect way.
Yeah. ومن غير ما ده يريتريجر بقى في
ومن غير ما نعمل ruptures وهيبقى في ruptures بس I think with ruptures you also have to be very capable to say we can have a rupture and we can do a repair and it's safe to do that. And a rupture does not mean that it's the end, right? It's not over.
It's part of the corrective emotion.
And it's part of the growth and the development. And I think لأن كل ده reenacts itself in therapy. ما هو كل القصص دي هيك بتحصل exactly in therapy. Where clients will idealize, where clients will reject, where clients will look at you like become overly dependent. And you have to be aware of when this is happening to push back and say, I'm not mother, I'm not father, I'm not your companion for life, and I need to let you go, and I'm not rejecting you. I am rejecting this relationship. I'm not the relationship. I'm not rejecting you as a person. I don't want us to have this because it's not healthy for us.
Okay. Do you use self-disclosure for supervision?
Oh.
In what cases? When would you feel that it could be helpful?
Again, it's exactly like self-disclosure in therapy. Minimal, or when it is going to تسمع في حتة with that particular supervisee that they can actually do it understand what it's either as my past as being a student in training. So sometimes you use a lot of that. I was anxious too. Like it's a very common thing. It's okay. It's not that look at me, I'm brilliant, but it's the idea that other people who you may trust were in that position. I did not feel like an expert from the first 100 hours of clinical work. Of course not. When can you be a good therapist? يوم من الأيام. One day it will happen. Sorry. وحشة قوي. يوم من الأيام قريب قوي إن شاء الله. عشان نخليها تبقى واقعية. مش دلوقتي. تحياتي مش دلوقتي. So, and you use self-disclosure, and again, this is something that you need to be reflective and monitoring about. Am I self-disclosing because I have relational needs, or am I self-disclosing because this is serving a purpose in this moment with this particular supervisee in their growth and development? It's exactly what you would do. Well, are we just having a chit-chat? غير icebreakers, how's the weather and how have you been? Which I make a point of always asking about supervisees' personal lives, right? Because they have personal lives. You can't ignore the fact that but it doesn't mean that they can also ask me about my personal life. They can a little bit, but I will tell them what I think is valuable enough. كمان احنا في culture بتاع ده. So it's very difficult to say لا بص أنا أسألك أنت ما تسألنيش. أنا أقول لك أنت ما تقوليش. So there is that part where it's part of creating the safe relationship. How can we be safe if I'm constantly saying no, you cannot, right? It has that hierarchical.
I'll ask one more question وأحاول أسكت عشان I'm sure they have a lot of questions. فحضروا أسئلتكم. I'll try to make this the last one. Do you find it challenging أوقات to supervise supervisees معينين بprofiles معينة أو كده given إنه مش دايما بيبقوا you're not always زي في الجامعة context في برا الجامعة context ثانية. Would you like to say something about that?
بحبهم كلهم. زي
قد بعض. مفرقش بينهم.
ما فيش أي فرق ما بين
بلاش favorites.
ما فيش حد بيعلق So this goes back to what I was saying, that we don't get to choose, right? And you don't get to choose supervisors. You're just given a supervisor and you're told this is your supervisor for the year, for the semester, for the experience. I don't get to choose my supervisees.
But she likes you all.
Yes, I love you. I guess this was my cue shot.
على فكرة احنا عندنا سوبرفيجن النهارده بس عشان
كملنا لسه معاهم.
Thank you for the reminder. No, I think with every I think every supervisee as a learning experience for me, right? And it's not that they're guinea pigs, but I learn as well. I look at my growth trajectory from being a supervisor in training, مثلا 12, 14 years ago or whatever, and I've grown a lot in how I supervise and what I do, what I don't do, what I can tolerate. And every supervisee is a challenge, let me get to know them, let me get to know what they need, let me get to figure out, do I have what they need to give them? And as always, I think it's the same, there will always be things that don't go the way I would have liked them to go, and it's okay, that's part of working with it. This exactly is clients, we get assigned clients that we don't like, and we have to figure out how can I find my empathy for them, how can I find my need to help them grow. It's the same thing with supervisees, and sometimes في supervision shifts. طبعا I call them attachment. طبعا the more disorganized they are, the more problematic it is because you're constantly in this. فهو supervision is احنا نسميها مش ان هو like or not like. في some supervisees will require a lot more energy and a lot more effort than others where it will come more naturally. I call it زي temperaments. Our temperaments are not a good match, or I'm just not able to work with this, but it's manageable.
Okay.
You're all great. You're all, none of you are فكرة.
Thank God it's only one semester.
Sometimes it's two. Sometimes it happens frequent. Or sometimes it's post-graduation. Huh?
Yeah, we know. And you didn't stop?
I am never stuck.
Questions?
Yes, we can take questions. Of course, ما فيش.
لا مفيش حاجة أكمل. لا
Keep processing يحسب بس
No, I have a question.
Yes.
How would you make sure that your personal attachment style
أيوة بقى الأسئلة اللي مستنيينها دي. ده لو أنتوا ما سألتوهوش.
I don't have a personal.
you don't
هو متصلح من الوضع. تعيش تفكر إن هو incongruence ممكن تقول لي حاجة.
and how do you see your attachment style impacted at some times in supervision and what do you do?
نيورون. كيف السؤال ده؟ So you have to okay. So one, you have to be aware of the fact that this is happening and this is what's impacting, because I don't think your attachment style keeps coming up in every relationship. Sometimes it's a little bit more triggered in certain relationships, especially ما هو في reenactment برضه. It's the other way around. What goes this way comes that way برضه. Either the person is triggering something that is making that attachment style come out, and it's all about self-awareness. So sometimes, I'm not saying mistakes don't happen, I'm not going to be idealistic. Sometimes something might happen, but you have to be aware of it and try to fix it, right? One way or the other, because if my goal is constantly to ensure that there are healthy relationships, healthy corrections, then there's a lot of it just takes a lot more effort when this happens. Yani, hopefully it doesn't happen as much as much as people would like. And I always say I can always tell when something's going to happen. Happens when when I am feeling vulnerable, when I'm feeling tired, when I'm because there are other variables, and it makes it much easier for these things to be triggered.
Okay, I wanted to ask about multiple roles in the academic setting. You're multiple things: supervisor, a teacher, and mentor. You're so many roles at once, and then sometimes you also supervise people who don't have these roles, where you're the supervisor, supervising, and that's it. Do you find that there's a difference in how the relationship is already built in, and you have to build the relationship in? Do you feel like there's a difference in those settings?
Slight. I would always like to think of myself as a supervisor. So as a mentor, especially in academia. A lot of supervision has a sort of a teachy kind of feel to it, right? Not in a bad way, but it has I think the only difference in an academic setting is the evaluatory component, the grading part. Like on top of everything, I can do all this mentorship, supervision, give you knowledge, share with you your highs and lows, but at the same time, unfortunately, I'm the same person that has to give you a grade, right? And that sort of comes in. So the idea for me is always to try and get students to drop the whole grade thing off their head, not in a surprise factor to say, so I can do whatever I want. I'm going to give you the C comfortably, but it's unfortunate, but we have to do it. And the idea is, I often would wish in grading was not on, but you can't grade human beings on who they are, you can grade them on what they can produce. That's the one thing but when you think about it, even any supervision has an evaluatory thing, because I'm constantly thinking, are they a good clinician? Are they growing? Are they becoming better? Are they changing? Are they more self-aware? Are they becoming aware of what they're bringing to the therapy room? There is an evaluation, but it's just not graded on a transcript, right?
I think because you just mentioned, and sometimes you supervise people per semester, sometimes two. I think you supervise practicum students and internship students. And I was wondering, do you have different goals and expectations between your practicum level and your internship level? Some kind of things you should have let go in practicum when you enter the internship as a clinician. Some kind of things you don't want to see as a clinician in the internship level versus the practicum level.
Yeah, thank you for this question. Yes, there's a huge difference. I mean, anatomy, like this semester was a sort of a relearning experience. I haven't taught practicum 1 in forever. It was a good reminder for me to remember what stage they're at, remember what they're capable of doing and not doing, remember what they need at this point. You know, it's thinking of it in development, because it's kind of like saying this is toddler phase. They're still learning how to walk, how to say hello to a client, how to just sit in the therapy room with a real client. And it's not about that, but it's reminding myself, evaluatory wise, what are your expectations? It's not about less or more. But some people can surprise me, and actually the group this semester is surprising me. They're much more advanced than I would have expected. Maybe I'm still old, فاكرة إن الدنيا مختلفة. And it would be very different than what I expect in internship. You know, I expect an internship because in internship you're about to graduate. There are certain questions you can't be asking. You can ask them, of course, and there's no question that's bad, but are you asking it just out of anxiety, or are you asking it because you seriously don't know, right? There's a difference. If you're anxious, that's okay. You will always be anxious about doing the right thing and doing the right thing. فطبعا there are من fall spring, my goal is to see a trajectory of growth. Right? The expectation, and when I constantly think the group of students I have now, I'm going to be handing them over to the next supervisor. What do they need to meet the next supervisor? What level should they be at to meet the next supervisor, and take it from there?
This is more of asking for advice or recommendation, because when you said you've had 14 supervisors, 10 of them were just okay. I feel like this is something we kind of struggle with after graduation, and a lot of supervision relationships, they're just okay. So do you have any recommendations on how to turn it from okay to something more كده?
ما هو هي بقى الكده دي، ما هو and also it will require sort of your judgment. I always say don't be shy to ask. Like, you know, early on we always say learn how to utilize supervision. Okay, so there's a part that's the responsibility is on the supervisee, not in a difficult sense, but create your agenda, have a plan, and then learn to ask for what you want, and then see what the response is when you are asking for what you want. Because technically, when you're asking for what you want, the person in front of you should be in admiration of the fact that you're able to voice your need. And then even if they don't like your need, they can work with you if they want to. But if they resist the need, as no, that's not, then you know that this is probably not the super. It's not an امتحان, but it's the idea. And I always tell people, I learned to. Anna, it took me 12 supervisors to know when I had a voice and I could ask for what I wanted, because no other supervisor before had ever told me. And I can ask. And I come from a culture where we also respect, these are big authority figures. أو مش بس ده our evaluators، ده هم ده الباص، ده اللي فاهم كل حاجة. فأنا هاجي أقول له أنا طريقتك أنت على فكرة مش مناسبة بالنسبة لي خالص، أو نفسي تبطل تقولي كل مرة إن فين الورقة وفين البتاع، يعني ما سألتنيش حتى أنا كنت عيانة الأسبوع اللي فات، ما سألتنيش أنا ما جيتش ليه يعني. It's the idea of it. But it took me 12 supervisors until one supervisor just told me, you know, so what is it that you need? And I'm like, need? I need. I have a laundry list of needs, you know, and I'm not gonna, right now I don't wait. I tell supervisees, hopefully I have told all of you, ask me for what you need, but I tell them, ask for what you need. But this is a reminder when you're, and don't be shy to, I think, I found a lot of people who get into supervisory relationships that are not working بيتكسفوا يطلعوا منها عشان عيب وهقول لهم ازاي و how do I avoidantly or run away بس من غير ما I run away. So I always tell people يعني I'm currently working with someone who I'm probably the 4th or 5th supervisor. And I asked, one of the questions I asked, and I think it was difficult for her, I said, how did you terminate each of the supervision relationships? وطبعا some of them were terminated by just lower ghosting. And I said, you know, one of the things I'm going to ask you is, when you feel that way, please come and tell me. Because we need to have closure. We each need to understand. So it's about, again, modeling what would happen in therapy. You know, there are some clients you may not want to work with, but you don't want to ghost them. And it's when clients ghost us, we get upset, right? You know, what did I do? Did something happen? Did they feel better? So get closure. So I think the biggest thing is to learn to ask for what you want and learn to feel okay saying, this is not what I need. And if the person is not willing to grow with you or develop with you, then you can exit. And I know it's hard to find alternatives.
لا معلش هم عندهم اوبشن هم يختاروا supervisor. undergrad عندهم اوبشن؟
لا she's a full blown كبيرة. سيبك من الشكل، لا هي كبيرة. لا في كوميديين هنا كتير. لا مش كل قلتك اوحي على السنين اللي فاتت تقول انا ما حدش اداني.
لا بس كنت اقول الواحد يتعلم من الوحش ولا حلو.
Exactly.
even ما بتعرفش تتعلمي.
Every supervisor can teach you something.
Yes.
At least it will teach you what not to do.
What not to do.
Yeah, and what not to do in therapy. Because when people say the supervisor, I find people doing supervisor wasn't working for me. Why? You need to be able to articulate it. Because we also need to know, was it just an initial خبطة that ended up in just resistance from both sides that could have maybe worked, or was it really something that was not going to work?
Segues سنة بس I feel like برضه عشان this program all our supervisors, they are professors, they know us very well, they're all very invested. لما نخرج بقى to the real world, it's very transactional ساعة كده. Thank you.
لا عشان انا بقول لك زي السوبرفايزر بتاع جسمك ايه
It turns from something very relational with our best intentions at your mind and having a relationship, seeing us in class, things are a lot more holistic, and then we turn into a transactional and out every 2 weeks سؤال إجابة. I feel like that's something that we need to get used to as well. And that حتة that made me not satisfied with my supervision relationships a bit.
So are you getting at least
We get into the knowledge modality.
Are you getting the knowledge
modality,
client crisis modality, solve this problem? Is it good?
It's okay.
هي اهم مشكله في انك بتعدي على دكتور ياسمين فهي بتبوظ لك
So I would say it's not about settling, but it's about, you know, if at this stage, as خلي بالك كمان development, if at this stage this will help you grow a little bit into a stronger therapist, use it. And you think of it, I'm using this until it's no longer useful. And then you can start looking, and I don't know if anyone would call themselves a relational supervisor, even though it is a model, but at least look for someone who's a developmental supervisors. بس يعني قوي يعني they're clinicians, they're doctors, it's the idea of, I don't think many people realize that there are supervision models. I was just going to say, look for someone who follows a model, but it doesn't matter. We'll find someone.
Sure.
بعد ما
يوم من
تخلصي
الأيام تبقي ثيرابيست كويسة ويوما ما يوما
لا
Dr. Yasmine, well, I want to tell you upfront, طبعا you have a little voice in my head all the time in therapy. What would Dr. Yasmine say?
The voice is in your head.
What would Dr. Yasmine say to that? But regards, you just said, you talked about how you disclose to clients, that you tell them, okay, if you feel like you don't want to continue this kind of relationship, please let me know. My question is, isn't there a bit of self-disclosure in what you're telling them? Yani, I know you had a bit of kind of a really difficult relationship with self-disclosure if it doesn't serve a clear purpose. فهنا when you tell them, don't ghost me, it is showing a kind of vulnerability as well. What is your take on that?
It's not. I don't think of it as showing a vulnerability. It's just saying, let's try and end this like healthy adults who can say goodbye to each other and just say, this is not working, right? Or even tell me feedback. You know, these are the things that are not working. This is what I would have liked. عايزة تقولي حاجة؟ حاسة إنها عايزة تقوليها جوه
أنا حاسة هي ليه علينا ليه مش عليهم. أنا I'm showing them. أنا فاكرة إنه my supervisor قالت لي I'm giving them the gift of making good closures. إنه not every closure has to be traumatic and sad and ghosting. I'm giving you an opportunity to end things well. That's for you as well, not just for me.
Experience.
Yes.
And that's the whole corrective experience of supervision. No, we can be close, we can be relational, we can grow together, we can develop, and then we can say goodbye. Hopefully, like adults, you know, like this is not, you know, it was, thank you, it was great, now we're done. We can move on.
عايزة أقول لسه واحدة بتقول لي إنه ثانك يو وقعدت تشعر لي وبتاع وأنا بتهيألي هاخد بوز بالمسج. قلت لها لا معلش أنا I'd like us to meet and discuss this in person. This does not. Well, I also respect if you don't want to come, but rather do it this way. إيه من حقك I'll come ومسأل الموضوع done يعني عشان بس ما تعديش كده.
Any other questions? I'd like to end by saying إنه حاجة من الحاجات اللي بتهيألي ناس كتيرة قاعدة لو مش كله من الناس اللي قاعدة هتبقى بتتفق معايا فيها إن دايما لما اسمك بيتقال there is something about who you are with people that really resonates. مش بس what you do أو how you help as in like guidance في حاجات معينة which you also do بس والناس كلها there is really something about you that resonates and leaves a very remarkable impact on everyone you deal with. Thank you on behalf of كلهم كمان.